Hello, and welcome to One Spark Stories, the podcast where innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it is a small world after all. While neonatal diabetes is rare and occurs in about 1 in every 400,000 live births in the United States, it is usually seen as a random genetic mutation. The Vacchio family somehow beat those random odds, though, by welcoming their 2 incredible children into this world with the diagnosis. They may be considered rare, but they certainly aren't alone. However, it did not always feel that way. Christy and Dan had their son Andy in April of 2005, but they were almost immediately thrown into this unknown world of rare disease when he was diagnosed with idiopathic type 1 diabetes at 18 weeks old. And everything you think you may know about diabetes flips itself on its head with this one. In December 2006, Andy's DNA was sent off for genetic testing, and his diagnosis was changed to neonatal diabetes. In August 2009, their daughter Katie arrived and was also diagnosed, even though statistically it should not have happened twice. As they started meeting more families around the world, they saw a huge need. They realized that there was a greater need for more support and research for the children and patients who have Den's syndrome, as well as those with neonatal diabetes, who are still fighting for that genetic diagnosis or a better treatment. They now work to help as many other families as they can navigate their road of rare diseases, and I could not be more excited to have Christy join us today. Now, please know that as we talk, she and I are 2 moms navigating the world from our experiences. If you are ever unsure about a condition, symptom, or even diagnosis, please reach out to a medical professional. As we share the ups and downs of our stories, I want you to remember that ultimately those medical professionals that we got connected with are who have given us the gift of answers and provided ways for us to navigate our own unique situations. Hello, Christy, and welcome to One Spark Stories. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Just got done with parent-teacher conferences with my kids, and we're making progress. So I'm happy about that.
That is definitely something to celebrate. And I think that any parent can definitely relate to that feeling like, okay, progress, good, this is good. I think what is going to be really powerful today is our conversation about what that means to you and your family and what that means for the sidetracked parents, which we'll dig into a bit more. But at just a quick glance, can you give us an overview of who you are and really how we got here today?
Yeah. So I am a former teacher and now am working full-time as my kids caregiver. So I'm considered a parent CNA, certified nursing assistant, and Colorado is one of the only states. It's one of, I think, 2, maybe 3 states that actually will pay special needs parents to care for their kids if they have certain certain issues and have to be cared for, past the point of what a normal kid, quote unquote normal kid, would need at their age. So my kids are 17 and 13 now. So we're in the midst of the teenage years, which have been more difficult than when they were kids. And so I had a love of science growing up, and just happened to, when I ended up in teaching, just happened to become like the science guru, teacher, lesson planner, everywhere that I went. And but I've always had that kind of like analytical, scientific mind. So when my son was diagnosed with a really rare disease, I kind of threw myself into being that researcher. And just along the way, over the course of the last 17 years, I've learned a lot about rare diseases of how to help people, and, you know, made my own mistakes so that now I can like talk to other people and support other parents in their own journey. So that's kind of where I am today. Just finishing my book that took me 13 years to write.
Well, you've been busy.
I've been busy. But yeah, I started writing, and my mom was a little bit of a writer. She dabbled in writing as well, more on like the children's book sides, but she didn't ever publish anything. But she kind of sparked my love of writing and reading. And my dad was an avid reader. I mean, he had, you know, just tons of bookcases filled with books. And so I just grew up with that love of reading and the love of writing, and just really being creative and expressing myself in words. And so, you know, that's just kind of how I turned out. Like, I think I've always been a writer, but this is the first time that I've finished an entire manuscript, and hopefully going to be publishing it in around February. So I'm in the editing phase, which was a little scary. But,
Yeah.
but it's going to be a long process, but I'm hoping to publish like around February. So and as a side of that, like that's kind of like my big thing that I've been pushing to finish this year. And it was on my vision board, and I was like, I'm going to do it this year. And so here we are. So yeah.
Visions are power. Visualizing is powerful. And it's interesting to hear you talk about the scientific side and yet that creative writing piece. And we'll get more into this, but what a powerful blend to now be an advocate for those families with rare disease. And when I saw that you were working on it, it gives me chills just thinking about it. And there's just so many layers to this. But when I saw you mention that, I thought, okay, I've known you for years, and I know how much this has been a part of your family. I mean, we met when we were both in education and helping with the, instructional practices in districts, and seeing your story come to life in this way and essentially we turn our mess into our message. I am so proud of you for that. And I am so excited to have you share it. And before we go too far down this path, I do want to slow down and go back to that childhood, Christy, because you started to mention it. I'm curious. You mentioned liking writing, but as a kid, what was your creative outlet? If you were able to have that free time, what were you often doing?
I was actually my aunt and my grandmother both taught me how to crochet. So I loved doing crochet. They also taught me, this was back in the 80s. I'm an 80s child. So I did cross stitching. So cross stitching, crochet. And then I started kind of dabbling in scrapbooking a little bit when I was, probably middle school, I think. And part of that came from just my dad was a minister of music in Southern Baptist churches. So we moved around a lot. So I started journaling, and I can't even pinpoint a time when I started it, but I can remember being, having the diary with the lock on it, and, and opening up my diary and writing about my day and about my hopes and dreams and wishes. But that was kind of something that I started as a young kid, just the journaling and the scrapbooking, just because I wanted to document my life. And so I've really been doing it for as long as I can remember. And I remember even, of course, it was part of my school education, that you had to write stories and you were taught how to write stories. But I've like gone back and seen some of my stories, and they were very imaginative. I'm like, how did I come up with that at 10 years old? Like, wow. Like I read those words and I'm like, where did I come up with that? But I've always had like this very vivid imagination. And so I think, one of my outlets, even to this day, is just getting into like fantasy and sci-fi and just things that are not real life. I like to see that imagination in other people. And I've also written some of my own stories. Even when I was an assistant, before while I was going to college, before I was a professional educator, I worked with students who were immigrants and, didn't speak very well English. And so we wrote like a story, and I ended up writing a story to give them as a demonstration. And I went back and read that story, and I'm like, man, I need to publish this. It's really good. So, I've just always enjoyed that. And so, yeah, I think anything with my hands, with the cross stitch and the crochet and the scrapbooking and the writing, have just always been part of my creative outlet, which is why blogging became so important to me when I had my kids, because I needed some way to get it out of my head. So I've recently been diagnosed with ADHD as an adult, and it explained a lot about my childhood. I mean, like a ton.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I look back on my life, I can tell, like, I can see points of my life when I definitely probably did have ADHD as a child, but just, didn't get diagnosed. And I think that's probably very common for adult women, like that we've had it, but just weren't diagnosed with it. And it explains a lot about like how I approach things and why I had a hard time really honing in on what I want to do, because I want to do everything. That's just, unfortunately, part of being ADHD is like you get all these ideas. And I was actually talking to my sister about this, that my brother and I are both ADHD now. We've both been diagnosed, and we have trouble finishing things. My sister is like the total opposite. Like that's her thing. Like she loves to complete things. She loves having a checklist and going through the checklist and then, saying, okay, I'm done. I've completed this. And I am really good at starting things and really suck at finishing things. So I'm very proud of this accomplishment. I have finished this book because, like I said, it's been a long process, but I'm very proud of myself for finishing it, because it's definitely, it's a work of heart.
You should be proud, because as somebody else, another individual that has been diagnosed with ADHD within the last, it's been about a year and a half now.
Yeah.
I struggled with the same thing. And yet for years, I was being treated as though it was depression and anxiety. Now, anxiety is very real. That's still a huge piece of it. But that finishing piece, and I think where the wires get crossed essentially for the diagnosis is, especially I'm learning in women, it manifests very differently. It's not that I don't have the desire. In fact, often individuals with ADHD, it's that hyper focus and intentional, like we see that big opportunity and we go, go, go. But I know that finish piece, I would get to the finish and think it's not good enough. It's not there. It'll never be good enough. And so, to be able to say, I have written a book, I have finished this, and that's major. Writing is not easy. It's a challenge, and I force myself to do it. And it sounds crazy because I love writing. Yet you're so right. That finishing piece is something that is very overlooked. And I value your conversation on just bringing attention to different diseases and diagnosis, because there's such a negative assumption that if you don't do it this way, the systemic way, this way we've always done it, and what's worked for so many other people, if you don't do it that way, something's wrong with you and you're broken. And it's like, my goodness, I'm not broken. The system is broken for me. It's not allowing that to go. So was there ever somebody in your life that you can think of that really was that model for you? I mean, taking a leap that you did, you moved away from where you had really established roots with your career, you left education. Was there somebody that you looked to as that guide, whether it was a kid as a child or even as an adult, that really influenced that and empowered you to, connect with your purpose and take this chance?
I think the name that comes to mind immediately when you say that is my aunt. My dad's sister, she was, and I think she was probably ADHD like me, because she was one of those people that like jumped around from job to job to job, had her own business, did this, did that. And she was always looking for the next thing that she wanted to do. But she was an amazing woman, just can't, I mean, I need a whole show to talk about her, but she was a musician. In fact, most of the people in our family are musicians. And so she was just amazing on the piano. And she eventually, after years and years of trying different things out, she finally got her dream job where she was going to be a music teacher at William Carey College in Mississippi, down in Hattiesburg. And she moved down there to start that job. And then she had breast cancer a few years before that, and her breast cancer came back, and she was going to like even go and get like her doctorate and everything. But she followed her dream, and then, she ended up passing away like the next year. But for her, like the way that she, went from thing to thing to thing, but then eventually came back to her love and her passion of music. And so I feel like I am, she really influenced me to try new things and try things out and see what works for you. And then, find your purpose in life and do it with all your passion. And so I feel like the marriage of education and science with me is really where I flourish and I thrive, because I love, like I said, I'm very analytical. And so I love finding a solution to a problem and then helping other people find their own solution. And so that's kind of where I am today. And I feel like that's, if I hadn't gone into education, if I hadn't like switched my majors in college and gone into education, I don't know that I would have all the skills that I would need to be able to help people in the situations that they're in now. So I think having that marriage was definitely a very important part of my process.
And part of that journey has led you now to be really helping others within, let's see, you were talking about the neonatal diabetes and about rare disease, and specifically, okay, I have to mention again, the Sidetracked parent. I just love that. But it also, your intention behind Adventures in Candyland. And if you could say a little more to what that is and what that purpose is for you now, because go ahead. There's so much to that I could go on about.
So, and I'll try not to be too long-winded, but I'll start at kind of at the beginning, is that when my son was first diagnosed, and like most rare disease families, anybody with a rare disease, usually it takes a while to get the proper diagnosis, because usually it's so rare that doctors don't know what they're talking about. And that's kind of what happened with us. But because of the analytical side of me, I was very frustrated. I was taught, at a young age, that doctors are experts. Doctors know things. Doctors just, you trust them because they are the quote unquote experts. And it probably took me about 4 years to really understand that they had no clue what my son had. And I had to become an advocate for my kids. And that's what a lot of rare disease parents do. So when I had Katie, and she had the same thing, which all the doctors were like, nah, she can't have the same thing. It's so rare, blah, blah, blah. And then she was born with the same thing. And I was like, okay. And I even had to like advocate for her, because the doctors were still saying, even though we had all the signs and all the same symptoms as Andy had when she was born, they still were like, well, not necessarily. And I'm like, okay, I'm done talking to you. Yeah. And so I became an advocate for her and found the doctor who, diagnosed her. And we finally got the genetic test back after she was diagnosed, and it confirmed what we already knew. But at that point, after she was born, that's when I really started thinking, okay, I can't be the only parent who feels like this. So in the beginning, I started a blog, and in the beginning it was called My Two Sweet Babies. And so, and the URL was babieswithdiabetes.com at the time. And so I started it just really kind of as a journal of my experiences, because I wanted to, let other people in our family know what was going on with us, and for me in the beginning was just kind of a therapeutic thing where I just needed to get it out of my head. And so that's how it started. And then along the way, after they got older, I was like, okay, well, they're not babies anymore. So maybe I shouldn't call it babies with diabetes anymore. And so that's when Adventures with Candyland was born, because when I was pregnant with Andy, we used to call him Kate Andy because we didn't know if it was a boy or a girl. So we knew we wanted a Katie and an Andy. And so we called him Kate Andy. And so that I just kind of like, it just naturally came up, Candyland. And I was like, oh, I should do that. And so I searched around and I ended up using Adventures with Candyland as my title for my blog for a long time. And then at one point, and I'm trying to remember, it was probably around 2017 that I actually went home to Mississippi to be with my dad because he had had a heart attack. And while I was sitting there in the living room with my mom, I mentioned that I was kind of frustrated that we didn't have like an awareness ribbon for neonatal diabetes. Because like, yes, they have diabetes, but it's not really the same thing as type 1 or type 2. And they also have like epilepsy, they have seizures, and they have autism. And so it's like they don't really have a quote unquote box that they fit into, because they have what's called complex medical issues. They have a lot of different things. And so my mom was like, and she's also she was an artist. And she's like, well, why don't we just make one? And I was like, okay. And so we did some searching on the internet and we found this really cool ribbon that somebody had done for breast cancer, where they turned the ribbon, the top part of the ribbon was just like any other ribbon. And then down at the bottom, it turned into a DNA strand. And so we took, basically what we did is we married that one with the diabetes ribbon, which is blue and gray with a little red dot for, checking your blood sugar. And so we made that. And then that's how my Shopify store was born. Was I ended up putting that ribbon on some t-shirts and stuff so that people could order them in our neonatal diabetes community. And they were like, yeah, I want one. So I started a Shopify store and I've sold all of like 3.
Hey, but that's 3.
But that's the start of it. And then, and so eventually when we started, when my husband and I decided to start the Sidetracked Parent, which, we were talking about, we wanted to start a YouTube channel. And so we started a YouTube channel. And then after we started that, I just decided to rebrand everything to the Sidetracked Parent, because initially I was just pigeonholed into the neonatal diabetes community, but because it's such a small population, like there's less than, I want to say there's like less than 1,000 cases worldwide. And what my kids have, which is a whole syndrome, there's like less than 50 worldwide. And so I started quickly realizing that, yes, I was helping that community, but I wanted to help people on a broader, in a broader community. And so I started realizing that, the things that I experienced as a rare disease mom is the same thing or very similar to what other rare disease moms experience, which is that frustration, that, going to many doctors and trying to figure out what they have and test upon test upon test. And then, when they enter the school system, it's a whole other, ball of things that you have to do with IEPs and 504s. Yeah. And it's a lot to deal with. And so I wanted to make a place where people could come and share their frustrations and talk real talk, not this, oh, I have a kid with a rare disease, but it's a blessing, Yeah, I have days where I think it's a blessing too, but in all honesty, most of our days are, God, that was a horrible day, or I was so frustrated. It may only be like 5 minutes where they were bad, or annoying or frustrating, but it just totally like clouds your whole day. And so I wanted a place to be safe for people to come and like hear those conversations between me and Dan and what we have to go through. And the funny thing is one of our videos that really took off, which was a surprise to us, was talking about having teenagers who are still in diapers at night. And people just flocked to that video and they were like, yeah, still in diaper, or, my kid's still in diapers and they're an adult. And, and it was just, I think people just weren't talking about it. And so it really hit that nerve with people where they were like, yeah, I feel you. I've been there. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of, and I kind of put a lot of that on hold while I was finishing the book. But now, once the book is totally edited, that's kind of be my focus, is the sidetracked parent, and, reaching out to people and helping.
So I love that. And I think that you hit it spot on when you mentioned that people just weren't talking about it. It's the same reason that I felt drawn to finally do the podcast, was because I love connecting with people and asking questions and hearing stories, but yet not enough people feel comfortable, for whatever reason, asking questions. And not just about rare disease, not just about professional journey, but just in general, we've become very isolated, and it can emotionally isolate you. And so by being able to say, oh, thank goodness we're not the only ones that are dealing with this, or oh my gosh, thank goodness we're the only ones that can say today just really sucked, and you don't feel alone. To feel seen is so powerful. And I know when we first found out, so my son was diagnosed with neurofibromatosis, NF1, in 2020. Let's talk about a doozy of a year, right? And in that, the blessing truly was that we were getting more answers finally to connect the dots.
Right.
And yet that confusion did hit. And I will say forever, I am so grateful that locally there is a very strong community, almost concerning how many families I know personally that are dealing with NF, and that's considered one of those sort of rare invisible diseases. And yet it's so prevalent once you start connecting with people. And so by creating a ribbon and by creating this community, you're allowing people to start being heard in a way that they otherwise haven't. Now, do you have any tips or suggestions for people that maybe are feeling this pull, like something's there, and not to just, I'm not to just say, oh, I have a diagnosis, now I can whatever, just say my kid has this. No, but to truly advocate for your kid. Do you have any tips on how to navigate that when you do feel like there's something? Because it's overwhelming for some people to think, to challenge my doctor. And, certainly doctors know their field. You just have to get connected with the ones that will also hear you.
Yeah. And so I think the biggest thing that I can say is, don't be afraid to not trust your doctors. Mm-hmm. Definitely hone into that, tune into your mother or parent, tune into your motherly instincts or your fatherly instincts. If something doesn't fit or doesn't make sense, then push, definitely write down the questions before you go to the doctor's office. And if they don't know, then don't be afraid to go and find a different doctor, because it was my own endocrinologist who was taking care of Andy at the time and knew about neonatal diabetes. And when Katie was born, he still said, I don't think that she has it, even though her blood sugar was higher than what a normal newborn baby should be. Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay, so, the thing, and to talk about rare diseases for a moment, one of the things that, and you might know this, like one of the things that's prevalent in the rare disease community is the zebra. And do you know the story of the zebra?
I don't know that I do.
Okay. So in rare diseases, zebra is kind of like our mascot, I guess you could say. It covers all rare diseases. And the reason that they went with a zebra is because, I don't know when, but, back in in medical schools across the country, and I don't know, maybe even around the world, I'm not sure, but definitely across this country, when doctors were in medical school, they were taught, if you hear hoofs, if you hear hoof beats, don't look for a zebra, look for a horse. Because 9 times out of 10, whatever your patient has is a normal virus, disease, whatever, and it's not going to be the rare disease. So don't go looking for the zebra. If you hear hoofbeats, it's probably just a horse. And yes, that is true 9 times out of 10. But then you've got these people that are the 1 in 10, or however many is in your disease. And so the zebra became kind of like the mascot. And so they have like awareness ribbons with a zebra on it, a zebra print. And so if you ever get involved in like Rare Disease Day, you'll probably see zebra stuff all over the place. And that's why, is because doctors are taught in medical school to not look for the zebra. When if you have a rare disease or something that's hard to explain, it's probably something rare, and doctors don't know about it. And so that's what they use kind of as their awareness ribbon, is the zebra. So
that's fascinating. And it's powerful to think, you've got to advocate for your child, for yourself, ask questions, challenge. And if you feel uncomfortable or unsure, like you said, find another opinion. It is okay. You are not indebted to one person. And we feel very fortunate that it actually was our pediatrician that said, hey, wait a minute, we're noticing something here and we're connecting dots. I think we might need to have a deeper conversation. And yet I know for so many people that is not the experience, even especially as an adult with an ADHD diagnosis. Let me tell you, the hoops that some people have to jump through. And it's unfortunate. I certainly understand that there are reasons to be cautious, but at the same time, especially when it's your child, and in your case, especially when it's a pattern you're noticing with your second child, speak up and speak out. And yeah, watch for the zebra in your own home, especially.
And I know
really cool.
That, doctors all the time say, don't go search on Google because you're just going to find all the bad stuff and like be really worried. But honestly, and when Andy was born in 2005, Google, and I talk about this in the book too, that Google was in its infancy. So when he was first diagnosed, we weren't told neonatal diabetes. He was 4 months old at the time. And his endocrinologist at the time told us that he had something called idiopathic type 1 diabetes. In other words, he had type 1 diabetes, but it was not following the same pattern as type 1 diabetes. It wasn't until the following year when we moved to North Carolina and saw a new endocrinologist. And it just so happened that we met the endocrinologist the month before this new treatment came out in, published in the journals, that he found out about neonatal diabetes. And he's like, I think your son might have this. Once I had the correct term and I went to Google, all of a sudden there was all this information. It was still very, it wasn't a lot, but it was definitely, it put me in the right direction. And in all honesty, with our kids' rare disease, because the treatment is so new and it's unusual in the medical community to have a new treatment that you're able to see immediate results. And that's what happened with our kids. But it was because of that when we started meeting with doctors in Chicago, and they have a conference every 3 years in Chicago where they're doing the research for neonatal diabetes. It wasn't until we all got together and the doctors started seeing patterns like, oh, all these kids with the V59M mutation are acting the same. Let's do some research on that. And then they started noticing, oh, wait, this is different from their siblings. And so they did not just research on our kids, but also on, a lot of families have like, quote unquote, normal kids, and they have like one with neonatal diabetes. And so they started doing research and they found out that it took years, but going to that every 3 years was very important because they were able to see it with their own eyes and go, oh, wait a minute, this might be part of their neonatal diabetes. It might be caused by this mutation. And so it was really getting the kids together in one room that they were able to go, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so if you have this gene, we need to watch out for neurological issues. And if you have this particular mutation, there's a couple of them, but they're like, if you have this mutation, whatever, you really need to follow them closely with a neurologist because they might have seizures that are not very easy to diagnose. and that kind of thing. So it was really the diagnosis of Bend syndrome, which stands for developmental delay epilepsy and neonatal diabetes. That syndrome, like naming of that syndrome, didn't come out until, a few years after, or maybe a couple of years after he was finally diagnosed with neonatal diabetes. So, are there more than what we know of right now? Possibly. And it's still so new in its infancy. We're not even 2 decades into this new treatment. So I think a lot of times it's missed because the child dies, or the doctor just doesn't know what to look for. So
it's fascinating. And golly, my mind's swirling with all the different ways that could have gone, but to be able to say, once they saw it, once they saw the patterns, once they could connect the dots, and this is again why being visible, getting out there and asking questions, it allows the doctors to start having those little ideas, the sparks go off and go, hold on, we do need to be paying attention. This is something different, because things are evolving constantly in our bodies, in the world. And if you don't speak up and explain what you're seeing, then they're going to possibly overlook something that could provide a solution or an answer, or some type of support that would make that quality of life improve drastically. So I just, again, I cannot praise you enough for being that advocate for your kids. And as much as I want to celebrate you, because that is the third pillar of One Spark, we've talked about connecting and creating. I want to celebrate you, but on your terms. So aside from the book, which, not to diminish that, but we've already addressed it, what is something else that maybe we haven't hit on that for you really need to acknowledge yourself and pat yourself on the back? Because I think we don't acknowledge our own wins and successes enough. So what is something that if you were talking to yourself as a friend, you would say, you know what, Christy, you've done a heck of a job with this?
I think, maybe a couple of things. I think one is the fact that my husband and I have stayed together. I mean, in the special needs community, there are the divorce rate is so much higher than the general population. It's so hard to stay together when you have these challenges. And with Dan and I, like, we struggled a lot financially in the beginning of our marriage, and through the years we've struggled financially, but we got to the point where, I think in the beginning we talked a lot about their disease. And I think one of the things that really was important for us was to have our own thing that was away from the disease. And so, like with Dan, he builds model airplanes. And I mean, I'm not talking about like foamies with, put them together and go fly it. I'm talking about little tiny sticks that he glues together and like puts little pins. It's just amazing what he does. And for him, that's his escape. That's his relaxation time. For me, I try to do things away from, and I've mentioned it before that I really enjoy like fantasy and sci-fi. So I go through periods where I'm into like vampires, and I'm going through periods where I, read things that are, just in the fantasy world, fairies and stuff like that. I watch Lord of the Rings and, just that kind of stuff. That's my escape. And, my sister laughs at me because she's so much into like reality shows. She's like, I want to see reality shows. And to me, I'm like, I am done with reality. I want to escape into a world that does not exist.
I hear that.
and so it's just, that's kind of my escape. So like, I do have some ideas of, some different things that I want to write after this book, where it's more like helping parents in the rare disease world, kind of like, courses or workbooks and that kind of thing, kind of like a rare disease for dummies. I have no clue. My child was diagnosed with a rare disease. Now what? So that's kind of like my next working title for my book. But but I also have like all these stories in my head that are fiction and science fiction. And so I really want to kind of maybe to that and start writing a little bit of fiction. Just, I don't know that I'll ever publish it, but it just, I want to get my stories out of my head.
Yeah.
And so to me, that's my escape. So that has really been, I think, phenomenal that we're still together after 22 years with, 17, a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and we're still together. And we're not the only ones, I know, but it is difficult. And so I think just having that time by yourself and allowing each other to have that time is so, so important, because we don't always get time to go out. We don't go out on dates unless the kids are in school. So it's difficult for some parents to find that time. And I think that's something that we've always made a priority in our marriage.
I think that is definitely worth celebrating, because our family is the same in the sense that we all have our own thing, and we have the time to go do that and embrace that. And especially knowing that divorce rate is very real within the rare disease community. I love how intentional you and your husband are in making sure that you prioritize each other as well as your individual selves. So definitely worth celebrating. And I know we could go on and on. So who knows, maybe we'll have to reconnect once the book comes out. But I do want to leave with one final question that I love asking people. But what is one thing that you really wish people could unlearn? And whether that's within the rare disease or just in general, what is something you wish people could unlearn right now?
Oh my goodness, that's a loaded question. I think it's difficult because our bodies are wired to look for the negative. When you think of our ancestors, in the Neolithic period or whatever, I'm probably saying the wrong term, but you know what I mean? Like way back when we were evolving, our bodies are wired to look for the negative to help us survive. And I wish that we could unlearn looking for the negative, because it causes so much anxiety and so much trauma. And I wish that, people could see the good in things and look for the good in things. Like, I think about my son. He is a little more severely affected, or whatever you want to call it. Like he's doesn't have as much speech as Katie does. And but he, as difficult as he was very aggressive through his, earlier teenage years. And we got to a point where we were thinking we were going to have to put him into a group home, because we didn't feel safe at home with him. But in the same regard, getting him into the right setting brings out the best in him. He is so funny. He loves to entertain. Like he loves to dance and sing and make people laugh. Yeah. And I wish more people could see that in him, than they see this kid who is like, hey, what's your name? Hey, what's your name? Hey, what's your name? And they go, oh, he's autistic, and then just don't even give him a chance. But if you get him in the right setting, he's just such a great kid. He's so funny. In fact, today he got the award. They do awards once a month, and he got the award for the kid who makes us LOL all the time.
Oh, that's awesome.
He is so funny. And I just wish more people would give him a chance and see that in him, and not the negative things. So
that is very true. We spend way too much in that fight or flight state, when if we just slow down and embrace that person or the moment for what it is, there's a lot of beauty in it. Even in the mess, there is always a message to be taken away. So thank you so much, Christy. And I will make sure that we get everybody connected with you in the show notes, but where would you suggest people look for you? What would be the best way for them to reach out?
Um, Honestly, you can start with like, I'm very active on Facebook. So, really Facebook is probably the best way to start. And my name is on there as Christy Bird Vacchio. So that's really the best place to start. And then you can find my links in my profile, whether it be, rare disease, the book, whatever. And I'm going to be sharing pretty soon. I've already got it ready to go, but kind of like a newsletter opt-in, so that once I have some dates and stuff, I'll start sending those out and little teasers about the book and stuff. So
awesome. Well, I am so excited for that and grateful for you and your time. Thank you for just enlightening everybody on what that rare disease journey can look like, and the fact that you do still have a voice and you can advocate for yourself and your kids, and there's a way. There's a way to keep on keeping on each day. So thank you so much, Christy.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
As I shared, my son was diagnosed with NF1 neurofibromatosis in the summer of 2020. And there is nothing better than finding a community of support with others navigating life with rare or genetic diseases. Reach out to Christy using the information below, and reach out to your doctor if you feel like you could benefit from support that you just haven't found. Remember, the best advocate is yourself. Please be sure to rate and review the show. Those ratings and reviews are what really help get these conversations in front of others that are looking for that spark of inspiration or that community of support. Thank you for joining today, and as always, be well, stay curious, and we'll see you real soon.
Did you know Romans used to use urine in their toothpaste?
Later, Tater.